Lately, I have been learning the importance of using reference in my art. It's something I really haven't done enough of, even though it's an amazing way to work. Part of the problem I've had is not finding reference that inspires me. So after deciding to make this video, I saw my chance to go snap some of my own photos. I packed my gear and headed out to a location I've wanted to photograph for several years. Then I headed back home where I started my work. Hey everyone, welcome back to Learning Artist. Today, I want to talk about one of the most useful tools that you have as an artist. References. Reference is a sure way to make your art look twice as good. I suppose that's why painters have been using it for years. Even the best painters have used references. But for some reason, I never really gave a whole lot of thought to using references in my own work. I used it a lot for doing studies, but when it came to actual final works, I would always feel the pressure to sit down and paint everything from my imagination. But that's not the way it should be done. And references aren't just for artists who are starting out. The best part of this whole thing is that you never have to stop using references. Even the best still use references when working. One of my favorite examples of this is Norman Rockwell. If you ever do an online search of his work, you might come across some comparisons that show the referenced photo and how it translated into his final work. And the similarity is often very surprising. If someone as successful as Rockwell is allowed to reference their subject, then that means you and I can too. In fact, we should. Being able to reference correctly is a skill you will likely use for the rest of your life. But there is a certain way you should be using reference. Like I already mentioned, you can use references for studying and building a visual library, and you can also use it for your final works. Most people are probably familiar with using references as a way to learn. For instance, if I wanted to draw an ear, I would most likely find a picture and draw from that to learn the shapes. Then I would draw it from another angle and another angle. And eventually I'd be able to draw that ear without a reference because it's in my visual library. This is a great way to learn and be more confident about recreating that type of object in the future. Having this visual library is actually extremely powerful, especially if your work involves recreating the subject in multiple angles, and it's actually a very necessary skill for some artists, especially those in the field of hand-drawn animation, since they have to draw thousands of frames, and they can't be bothered by looking for references for each one of those poses. Thus, they have to rely heavily on their visual reference library to carry them through. But even then, they still do studies to get that reference library. The one thing about using reference that I didn't really understand until about a few months ago is that you can use it as a guide for your final works. That's what I'm doing in this video. But be careful not to let it dictate your work. Otherwise, you might just end up being a photocopier, which is kind of pointless. I'm constantly reminding myself of this because I default to that photocopy mode, thinking that detail and accuracy will improve the piece. But more times than not, I find that trying to accurately recreate the entire scene I'm looking at will only lead to a displeasing or incomplete image. So what I would suggest is focus on the reason you picked the reference. Whether you are working from real life or you found a great photo, there is a reason you picked it. This reason is what you should focus on. Every other decision you make in your work should reflect that desire to present that element. Sometimes that means extreme detail, and other times that means ridding the scene of everything but the subject. In this scene that I've been painting, the two things that really stuck out to me were the patches of brightness coming through the clouds and hitting the ground, and then those two silos over to the left. So I focused on the detail of the silos and pushing the contrast between the light and the dark so that those patches of bright would pop out. Now, I'm not saying that by using references, you're going to automatically be a world-class artist. What I am saying though is that if you use this correctly, it can help you tremendously. And I've seen how it can help me achieve my goals, so I thought I would share it with you. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave a comment below. How do you use reference? Or do you? Also, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next week.